Right, we are ready when you are, Mr. Mayor.
All right, sounds good. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Seldovia City Council, Monday, March 16th, 2026. Time is 6:07 p.m. and this will be a work session. Um, One topic tonight, FY27 budget discussion, broken down into a few parts, Budget 101, the general fund, special revenue funds, and capital projects budget. So Heidi, I'll let you take it away, and then yeah, I'm sure it'll be a Q&A as we go along here. So if anyone has questions, jump in. We typically do this every year for the new members as we're going into budget. The manager will give a kind of an overview of all the funds as we go through, as we start digging into the budget cycle here, just to kind of get everyone as a refresher onto how we budget and how the funds work and all that stuff. So.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I apologize if this packet material got out so late. So I'm going to go through it with you guys just piece by piece. I do not anticipate that we're going to dive into special revenue funds or the capital project budget this evening, but at least going through the overview, and we're going to do it as in the overview pages that are in the budget. I thought that might be a great way just to see what the public is seeing, and see if that makes sense, and if everybody's tracking, and hopefully that it gives a better understanding of the governmental functions of a budget. And then we'll dive into the general fund as time allows. And then I do have some backup material that hasn't been shared regarding the special revenue fund. So if we just get through things really fast and we want to jump in, we could. But otherwise, I was hoping and recommending that we could do that Monday before the next council meeting, because I know your guys' time is precious and I don't want to hold everybody hostage here tonight. So hopefully you all have a packet available in front of you. And there's a memorandum on page 4, just jumping right in, that is talking, that's really the budget 101 overview. And we've done this different ways in the past. We've done it with a slideshow presentation. We've done it like a full-on work session just about budget 101. We kind of gave a little taste of it at the last work session when we were talking about the cash flow management plan. So like I said, I thought instead of diving deep into it, we'll do a more basic overview like we share with the public. And then if there are questions that come out of it or things that you guys think should be amended or added or even taken out, then we can make those edits. So a quick overview, the worksheets just have a few small amendments. They're what have showed up in our budget for the last couple of years. And then I wanted, and we'll go through each page one by one, but I wanted to point out as well that the fee schedule has not really been talked about yet in this budget cycle. And that is a really important part of the budget itself. And it made me think when I was going through this budget overview that it should even be called out probably more in the budget overview pages. So I'm going to recommend including more information regarding the fee schedule in these pages moving forward. I don't have it yet, but I think that's important. And then really just next steps as we think through this. Like I said, general fund tonight, special revenue funds still need to be discussed, the fee schedule and capital projects, as well as if you guys, as we go through this, if there's anything else that you want to have more information on, a better discussion on, any bigger conversation regarding a topic, just let us know and we can make sure to pull information to present that. So if you follow along on page 5, other than the header, this is what you'll see at the very beginning of the budget, and it just gives us a breakdown of the city of Seldovia being a first-class city, that we're a city manager, city council form of government. Our officials and mayor are elected, and a mission statement. And then it lists the people involved. And if you then follow to page 6, it'll give you an overview of governmental functions, and this is just a very basic summary, so we won't spend too much time here, but we provide a range of public services, fiscal years July 1 to June 30. The council is responsible for hiring the city manager. The city manager is responsible for administration of city's public service functions. And then a basic breakdown of the governmental functions between the general fund, the special revenue funds, and capital projects. We also have a Seldovia permanent fund, which we'll talk about later. And that the general fund within the category of general government is used to fund unrestricted area-wide general public services. And the special revenue funds are mainly funded through user fees. So we mentioned that in the last work session, but that basic overview of the general fund is funded with tax levies, property and sales tax generally, and then the special revenue funds fund themselves. And I just put in there was a sentence in here about capital projects, but it was really vague. And I was hoping to clear that up a little bit. The capital projects are major non-recurring budget items that result in a fixed asset with an anticipated life of at least 3 years and are valued over 5,000. And you'll see the breakdown of the funds there in front of you, as well as the special revenue funds with the newly adopted one for volunteer fire and EMS. And then we'll have a page link for capital projects where it'll go to that capital project budget, which is normally with but separate in a budgeting process. So that'll be a separate discussion, even though they all tie into each other. So as we talk, you're going to hear me mention these things over and over again. Even if they're not necessarily the focus of this conversation, they all tie together. Any questions so far? Please feel free to jump in at any time. And hopefully this isn't too down in the weeds. Page 7, if you follow along, my favorite part about this page is that it puts citizens right at the top. So that used to not be the way our chart didn't have that inclusion, but I've seen other communities that do this, and I think it's really important to point out. So the last couple of years we've done this. It's citizens who then elect the body, the city council and mayor, and city manager, city attorney, which you just approved at the last meeting. And then under the city manager are the departments. That's just a nice reminder of the function. And then we'll move right along to page 8, and this is a more of a dive into the budget process itself. The city manager is responsible for presenting a budget proposal, and that's per SMC 301020. In that proposal, the expenditures should not exceed the revenues, and the unencumbered funds remaining at the end of the current fiscal year may be reallocated for purposes set forth. So those unencumbered funds, and you'll see that there we call it ending fund balance a lot, and that's the net of each account and or each fund or department, and it kind of runs with the fund. So sometimes those funds are used into the next year, and we talked a little bit about during the cash flow management plan, even transferring some of those funds into a capital project budget for the future, depending on if they meet that targeted revenue amount that will be hopefully set. So we talk about the narrative budget came about in FY23. We've been using that since, and that seems to be fairly successful. And then again, those 4 main types of government funds. So we just hammer that in over and over again. There's the general fund, special revenue funds, permanent fund, and capital projects fund or reserve funds. We do use the accrual accounting per generally accepted accounting principles, and that's for our audits. We present cash and accrual for the reports because DCRA with the state of Alaska likes a cash report, which is interesting, but that's besides the point. We function primarily off of accrual. And then the general fund being the primary operating fund of the city of Seldovia and consists of assets and liabilities used to finance the daily and long-term operations of the city as a whole. The general fund activities constitute the core administrative and operational tasks of the governmental entities. So pretty much every community has a general fund, and the general fund is your primary fund. We also include our community assistance program in the general fund right now, even though we've talked about weaning off of that or having that not be an income, a dedicated income into the general fund, but being able to use it for projects. That has not occurred yet in this budget that's been recommended or that's being recommended. And as we've also talked about, the general fund is one pot of revenue, and then it splits out into the several pots of expenditures. So you will not see revenues for council or revenues for the police department or revenues for public works. All of that revenue goes into the one pot, general fund. The expenditures are split out by the departments. I won't go in further to the special revenue funds because we'll talk about that at an upcoming work session, or the Seldovia Permanent Fund. I did make some adjustments to the reserve funds overview page. Major maintenance and repair fund was already in there. And then I included the police and public safety reserve fund, and that's on page 10 we're on right now, and as well as the public works fund and the Harbor Improvements Capital Project Fund. I also included a suggestion for a fund balance target of the 1-year operating funds, as we discussed at the last work session. And then future considerations is an ongoing target that's been in at least the last budget, for establishing a 10-year strategic plan, and the further implementation of a capital project budget, which is I think we'll see even more of it this year. It continues to evolve and get better. So that's an overview of governmental finances at a high level. Is there any questions really in regards to how our budget works before we dive in? No?
I have questions
Yeah.
because trying to get my head around
It's a lot, yeah.
all this. The permanent fund is an interest-bearing account, and we can take the interest out of that for capital projects. Is that correct?
So it was committed by the council with the intent for it to be held for 10 years in order to be able to draw a regular dividend once it meets a certain target amount. So initially, I believe the intent was for it to reach $1 million and then be able to draw like a 2% or a 4%, depending on how those interest rates accrue, so that the fund can continue to grow, but you're receiving a dividend to help offset some of these revenues.
I guess the question I have is, there's 500,000 in the permanent fund,
Right now, there's 700,000 with interest.
but
Yeah.
initially the base was 500,000.
The principal.
The
Mhm.
principal, and that interest bearing now is built up to 700.
Correct.
And what rate interest is it collecting?
About 8%.
So now we're getting 8% on the 700.
Mhm.
What's the projection for when it's going to reach $1 million at that rate?
It is projected at 10 years. So it's been in there at not 10 years from today, 10 years from when it was invested.
Okay, good.
So it was invested in 2023. We're at 3 years now. I've been invested in late 2022, right in that time frame. I have to check it was in FY 22. I'll have to check that time frame, but it was invested. So we're about 4 years in and almost halfway to that $1 million from when it was initially invested. So looking at it was projected at 10 years from when it was initially invested, and so far looking like it's on track. Our investment manager will come and speak to the city council here normally in about August July, August, they'll come in and give you guys an update. And then you can set the benchmarks from there. So they come every year. And from there you set those benchmarks of where if you want to be, aggressively invested, moderately invested, or a safer yield investment. I believe we're moderately right now, but I'll have to double check on that as well. It's been a while since I've looked at it to grow.
And once it reaches its maturity or the $1 million, then can we take, what portion of that can we use for capital projects? If
Sure, I see what
all
you're
of it,
saying.
or just of
The
500?
The principal is designated per code, and it can be only used for buying property. That's what the principal is set for by code, but the interest is available.
Okay.
You also have, so when we talk about the reserve accounts, you guys have about $700,000 sitting in reserve accounts with different functions, including the major maintenance and repair fund, which
Is that reserve account interest bearing as well
they all are, yes.
at 8%?
They're bonds, so they go up and down
Yeah.
quite a
Okay.
bit. But they've been doing pretty well the last couple of years. There was a long time where they were
Trying to
stagnant. Yeah,
Get my head around it, saying, okay, we have some money maybe potentially available to us in the near future here for capital projects.
you do.
Based on interest bearing accounts, it's going to generate some revenue for us.
You do.
And how much we can spend is.
Yeah, and so that will be hopefully a standalone conversation in the next month where we just talk about capital projects. But in the interest of time and budget, trying to make sure we get through the operating budget is important too. Any other questions? Great. So, and I didn't, just to give you a heads up, I did not include the entire budget worksheets in the back of this packet. I only included the general fund. I was going to include all the special revenue funds and the reserve funds. And then thought better of it. I was like, that's just too much information. So I did, simplify it down just to the general fund tonight, but I have that information. If you guys want to look at it, you guys saw the reserve funds at the last work session. It's there, the draft is complete. Now it's just working through all the finite pieces. And we can put it up and share it depending on how far we get. I just didn't, it's always a guessing game of how much to talk about in one evening. However you guys want to go with it. We will go then to the memo for the general fund and
What page?
on page 11. So it looks like you're there.
Yeah.
So this is a summary, and what I like to do, and actually Liz can, if she'll pull up the worksheets, I'm gonna just tear off the back of my packet because that's easier for me. And I'm sorry for those of you who are online and don't have a packet. It's nice to kind of be able to run through the sheet, the memo, while you're looking at the pages. Yes, page 15. Liz is gonna share it. And we'll run through the memo while we talk about the budget worksheets. So in summary, overall for the general fund and even more so for the special revenue funds as well, we anticipate or we try to anticipate all of our expenditures, which means we budget high for any actuality that we can try to anticipate, and even some of those unanticipated things that we know crop up from year to year. And then we also budget revenues low. So when you look at it, this is hopefully worst case scenario. This is, we're not spending any more than this. Hopefully there are unanticipated expenses that come up. And then we are not receiving any revenue less than this. We did, I will say, We did receive a email from our investment manager, just that they're keeping an eye on what's happening with the conflict in the Middle East right now and how that's impacting our investment. So it's hard to judge right now how that's gonna turn out in the next couple of years. But we are kind of seeing that trend down a little bit. So for the interest part of the investment, I did do a conservative 2% decrease, just trying to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a sticky spot where we're expecting a lot more than what we may or may not get. And I should also say, none of these figures are final. They're close, but as things come in the next month or so, as we talk, things will change. The general fund, again, being your primary fund, is approximately 61% of the overall budget. And as we've discussed, includes administration, council, public works, who is by far the largest department because they're caring for roads, facilities, equipment. They're just a large chunk of what we do. Fire and EMS, police, library, and Seldovia space. I would also point out that administration wages includes the SOC employee wages. And we do have a pass-through for that on page 15 here. You can see where under other revenue, it says SOC. So that's revenue received, the wages plus 3%. And then under administration, there's wages tied in for SOC employees as well. These wages did decrease this year because they have a new employee and a shorter schedule for that employee. So not a lot, but definitely a little bit of a decrease per the CRSA. They set that budget. And then Public Works also includes refuse. And we do track that separately about this time of year typically, and it seems to be trending the same. We see those revenues received for refuse exceeding the expenses, but it's always pretty close. It's none of these are money makers. We're not in government to make money, but just trying to keep track of expenses. And then that one it's a nice one to remember, that it also helps offset the cost for picking up garbage for the public, because we have a lot of public cans that we are responsible for, from outside beach, RV park, all the way to the airport, and throughout the community and this building, city building. So those we don't, those costs help offset that cost. Then the general fund also includes, as we mentioned, and we keep coming back to, those assigned and committed reserve accounts that are payable to the general fund. And the reason why I want to make sure to mention this is that you'll see on this page 15, if you go to the bottom there, Liz, these in the more beigey color, oh no, sorry, next page, blue color, page 16. These are the accounts that we've talked about for the cash flow management and the accounts that have accrued in our AMLIP fund, for the major maintenance and repair fund, the police public safety reserve fund, vehicle replacement fund, public works fund, which is at 2% sales tax, and then a small portion of the Seldovia permanent fund that was set aside in case that fund needed to be, or those funds needed to be liquidated quickly. With these funds, when they're payable to the general fund, that means if we take anything out of them or put it in, that impacts that ending fund balance. So that ending fund balance should be able to cover the cost of these associated funds. And right now it does not, and it hasn't. And that is called out in our audit annually, or at least it was called out in the last audit. So that's a target that we continue to watch, that should be met. I'm hoping maybe by the end of this year. If not, I would anticipate next year. You're not going to see that in last two columns, only because, like I said, we budget high. So FY26 is still budgeted very high. Expenditures, low revenues. So when those start to shake out, we've been trending in a better positive outlook. And that's been able to make up some of that difference. The other thing we talked about in the cash flow management plan is potentially having that operating fund, that secondary series, AMLIP series, well, it'll be AMLIP first series, but the secondary operating fund outside of our operating checking account, and setting that a rate suggested at a year of expenses. And so to hold true to that thinking, I included under the budget itself in that box, that first couple of lines talking about that operating fund balance target, 1 year of expenses, for 12-month expenses of 3-year audited. And it's not quite 3-year audited. I did the 2 years audited and the 1 year anticipated. So again, that'll be a change when the audit is completed. But it should be pretty close to $836,663 being the target. Your assigned fund balance is $557,858. Those are the ones in blue again. And so really your ending fund balance, if those are the targets you're setting, and then of course being responsible with being able to pay for these assigned funds or committed funds, would be the combination of those two. So that is just something to keep our eye on as we move forward, that we're trying to make sure that we can cover those funds. And then, let's see, I said here, the general fund, unencumbered funds have not yet. Oh yeah, so we talked about that. So they haven't met that. But current trends, we're thinking FY26, FY27. So that's a summary. And then I will jump into the overall recommendations. You can go back up to the top and we'll start talking about these where it's yellowed in on this page. Next page, sorry for the, I meant 15, sorry, backwards. There we go. Okay. So talking about revenues, this is where you'll see this page here, page 15, if you go back one, is your general fund revenues in a snapshot. So you got your tax revenues, and with those, according to KPB, our property taxes are supposed to increase, and our real property tax decrease. However, let's see. However, our property tax was budgeted low in FY27, and we're already trending higher. Not property tax, sorry, our real property, boats, airplanes, that such type of thing is trending higher than what we budgeted. So looking at that, we're slated at a 6.89% decrease. But even so, with that decrease, it would be around that 17,000, a little bit more. So sticking with that 17,000 mark, because that's where we're trending and showing. And if you look on page 16, you can see those preliminary figures from the borough, with that 6.89% decrease for personal. For real, we have their preliminary figures show a 2.81% increase. And we're pretty close to that 345,000 right now. It might be a little bit, we might be a little bit shy of it. And so ensuring that we are not expecting big leaps of an increase of revenue, keeping it where we're at and holding it steady is my recommendation for those two. Sales tax revenue, we are seeing a little bit of a trend down, as I said before. So I put a 2% decrease for that one. So from $288,025 to $282,265. But remote sellers sales tax, we didn't capture all of the revenues that we're anticipating for FY 26. And so looking at FY 27, what those figures have been historically over the last 4 years, where they are trending now, and then doing that 2% decrease to the 72,000. As I said, for the intergovernmental revenue, the community assistance is that first line that's highlighted, 75,991. And that right now is included as a revenue replacement. It'd be nice to eventually get that out of there, but it's just too close every year between our revenues and our expenditures when we budget. So it continues to sit in there. We used to have other intergovernment revenues. Really, that's the only one at this point. Every now and then the electric and telephone share shows up. And PERS relief is a small amount every year, but that's the main one. And then we have our charges for services, and that's, copies and business licenses and different rents and camping that's happening out of the city office. And so again, just a little decrease anticipated there, at least for licenses, permits, and fines, because we're seeing that just trending down. So not a lot, but a little bit. And then other revenue, we've just have some miscellaneous that we tend to accrue every year. And then our investment income trending down just a little bit. The SOC is a little bit lower, and those, as I said, rates are set per CIRSA, and the lease interest income, which is part of those rents and leases. So we have the interest that we table out, that our audit prep tables out every year, as well as the rents themselves. And then we don't typically try to budget late fees, and we don't like a lot of late fees, because if we're getting late fees, then that means we're not getting the actual revenues. So that's good that we're not getting a lot of those. That's really it for revenues. Any questions on revenues?
I missed something, Heidi. Was the total operating cost for the city, was it 7 million something, or what?
About 1.7.
1.7 million.
Yeah. And that includes the special revenue funds. So. And then you'll see here for the departments, there you'll see the expenditures laid out, and that those revenues do meet those expenditures, but it is close. And we'll talk about some of the differences in these individual accounts as we move on to the next couple of pages. I will point out before we do that you'll see also the total debt service for the road grader. So it's not included under Public Works anymore. It's its own item per our auditors for how that fund is audited, or that expense is audited. So. Okay. If we move then to administration, things overall summary of expenses. As I said, these are subject to change as more data is received. We typically look at the February Anchorage Consumer Price Index and plan accordingly with that every year, so that we build in our inflation. And that this year was 1.5%. So looking at wages and salaries across the budget, including that 1.5% COLA, and a potential, because we've talked about this in the past, 1.5% step increase. That'll depend on reviews. It'll depend on where we're at in the budget. That won't be an automatic increase, but the 1.5 typically is after July 1. All the employees get a payroll action form and they get that cost of living increase in order to keep up with inflation. So you'll see that across the general fund and the special revenue funds when we get to them. Health and general liability insurance estimates are not yet available. Typically, they've been capped the last couple of years at a 10% increase. So I thought that was a healthy estimate to start with. That could go up, but hopefully not. Hopefully it will go down once we receive those figures. The FY26 liability insurance actuals were actually significantly lower than we budgeted. We were told to budget for a 10% increase, and then the merger happened through AMLJIA and I can't remember, APEI, something like that. It's for they're more school board related. They merged and became the Alaska Public Risk Alliance, APRA. And with that, rates didn't really see an increase. They went down actually. So that was really pleasant to see. So throughout this budget, any of the you'll see that all of the general liabilities have a lower rate than what was budgeted in FY26, which is fantastic. And you'll also see then as we go into administration that I did recommend a reduction in travel costs for both administration and the council department, just because what we're seeing in actuals, and we've been pretty good about getting scholarships and just wanting to make sure that we're not eating a bigger piece of the budget than what is warranted. So did do a decrease on each of those, but still keeping in mind the AML winter conference and the, either like the summer conference or the legislative conference, depending on where they're at and if they, what the sessions are and if they hold value. We didn't go to the legislative session this year because we don't have a lot of big asks. It probably could have been worthwhile anyways, just to have those meetings with DOT and maybe the DOT commissioner and some other agencies, but we can also do that one-on-one or at another time. We have had conversations with Representative Vance, and Representative Stevens is planning to come to an upcoming meeting, but so far not a whole lot of huge asks. Of course, though, we do have the legislative priorities that council set in December. So we did not attend that one. Otherwise, the administration budget stays pretty similar. Not a lot of big jumps and changes, just kind of tracking. When we're setting this budget, we look back at the last couple of years, we look at where we're at now, and then we try to trend forward on where we expect to be. And it actually has a decrease. So you're seeing a 6% decrease overall for administration. If you go into council, and that's on page 19, so very similar, you're going to see a decrease for travel per diem, a decrease in contract services and leases. That did go up because we had the that'll be where, any appraisals or those kinds of things are, but we didn't have that. What we had was the AML grant writing services. And there's something else that just slipped my mind. And potentially the comp plan. We're still waiting. The borough did get back to us and they're looking at getting us some funds for the comp plan. But still looking at FY27 having designating 5,000 for those grant writing services. If that's the direction that council would like to continue. It seems they've been very supportive, and while they've only written 2 grants this year and they said that they would do a minimum of 3. We're looking at a 3rd one here coming up actually in the next month or 2, but it's been very helpful because I meet with them every month. And we just talk about what grants are available and what's coming and what's on the horizon, and they're tracking what's the priorities for the city of Seldovia. So as they see things that are important, they're able to point it out. It's kind of an added bonus besides just grant writing, and that's been nice. So hoping to continue with that as long as that still remains a priority for the council. And then you'll see that overall it's an increase from FY25, but a decrease from FY26. And the reason why I point that out is because FY26 had some heavy expenditures between council legal and between the capital projects budget for the cybersecurity improvements, and that came from that cap fund. So part of those cap funds were used for a project this year, which was nice to see, because that's not what's planned for FY27. Still tracking good on administration? Is this too dry? Is it too much information? It's good. Okay. Police department, volunteer fire, and EMS, library. I'm just gonna cruise right through those. EMS, Seldovia space, all pretty much stay the same. There's little, the COLA increase, potential step increase, and then the expenditures pretty much remains steady. So no big surprises or significant asks in those ones. Library, same. No big changes. And of course, library and Seldovia space are new because we used to just have a multi-purpose building. Well, we had library and Seldovia space 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And then we switched to a multi-purpose building for the whole building, and we're accumulating everything in there. And that wasn't working out as well because if like the library needed to know how much we were spending in kind to them, or the fire hall, how much in kind to them, or the police department, we were already having to break those out individually when those asks were happening. So it just made sense to go back to having those allocated out so that we can show what is spent in kind for those services in this building. So Public Works really is the bigger conversation this evening. And I have couple of scenarios to present, and would really love council feedback on, well, everything, but especially this topic. We're looking at our half-time Public Works employee retiring towards the end of this year. He said he's looking at September. And so with that, knowing that we've been, very fortunate to have his assistance for as a half-time employee. And then we have our 2 full-time employees, one of whom is now has taken the lead on water. So really spends half of his time in water. So we're looking at the department it would have 2 full employees with the ones we have right now, and then like a quarter employee for groundskeeper. But losing half of those 2 full employees, so having really more 1.5 Public Works employees, and then a quarter for groundskeeper if we do that again. And what projects we have coming up, and just where the priorities are for the council and the city. I wanted to have a conversation and see what you guys think about moving forward and either hiring another half-time or a full-time position for that department, or we can run it on less. We have before. It's really a matter of balancing. You may have more revenues. You may be able to do have more purchases if you have less employees, but you're maybe not accomplishing as much. So looking at weighing where those priorities are, and that's the feedback I'd like to have from you guys. You can see here in yellow that the big changes, and health insurance looks scary. It's not as scary as it looks because our health insurance was budgeted too low in FY26. But it is still, if you were to take on another third full-time employee, a third full-time Public Works employee, that's the most significant expenditure increase is those benefits. And I recommended, if that is the case, and so budgeting high, this is the highest scenario, that in training we do another $12,000, or that was about what it cost last time. So I'd hope that'd be where we are right now. Training where we have NIT, Northern Industrial Training, come down and run through running a grader, depending on who's hired. And Riley hasn't had that opportunity to have that training yet. And it's always a good refresher, and just having that person come down and run through the equipment with our operators. Also included here, just as an aside, under capital projects, these back stairs for this multi-purpose building, we keep talking about it. They keep getting worse. We just need to get them done. So I put a $5,000, I don't think it's going to cost $5,000, but put $5,000 in there for all eventualities, and then hopefully getting those stairs repaired. And oh my gosh. Okay. So if we go to page 13 of your packet, you'll see what I was talking about with project lists. And this is just off of their board and our grants and projects and things that we've had happening this spring, and overall the things that we have scheduled, tentatively scheduled, or ongoing, versus the new needs potential that are potential, or that eventually need to get on this list and be scheduled. And I should have put a number by them. There's quite a few. The reality is every year, some of these roll over. They don't get done because there's just not enough time. Not enough people. We do get emergencies frequently. And of course, those come first. And then there's the daily operations that need to occur. In summer, there's not as, we don't have the snow and the sanding in the summer, but we do still have street grading and vehicle maintenance. And there's just the daily things. This toilet doesn't flush, and these lights are out, or whatever it is that happens from the day to day, where they get work orders to complete those projects. So, you can see the police department improvements were budgeted in. There's a fire hydrant that needs to be rebuilt that we ordered a shaft for, and Todd with our remote supervisor is going to come over and help us with that. I know we keep talking about the water meter pilot project, and that's important to the council. I know Mr. Mayor's mentioned that to me recently, that we need to get that going. We had the C Street culvert that's ongoing, a new pressing need. We have a water service project over in the same area. The historic boardwalk improvements need to get done. Jackloff Uplands. I'm not going to read the whole list, but you can see there's a lot of competing interests in a short timeline. And we do the best that we can to meet those. What I didn't call out is the more major grant projects, which don't require a lot of assistance, but typically, it's unlocking gates, showing people where equipment are, being available if there's questions. I mean, it does take some time away. For instance, the raw water transmission line replacement project and Main Street stormwater improvements project, which are supposed to both set to occur this year, as well as the fuel and retail facility roof improvements project, which does include some in-kind assistance. So that they've been already forewarned that in end of August, September time, they're expected to slate out some time to be able to be available to help with that project. And then under those new projects, just some of the things we keep talking about, the BHO launch ramp improvements, for instance, that's ones that's been pushed for a year and a half now. It hasn't happened. Dock safety ladder improvements is a newer one that we keep talking about. The dam we've been talking about for years. I mean, we have 2 periodic safety inspections now that show, well, 3 really, but 2 in the last 3 years that show that the same condition, that the dam is in poor condition, And there haven't been any improvement on it.
I met our dam guy.
Huh?
I met our dam guy at the Sportsman Show.
You did?
Yeah, I forgot there's two people I have cards I need to send you info about. One was a dam guy who said he really wants to, because he tries to come out every couple of years or something, and
Mhm.
he'd really like to come out soon again and look at stuff, and also talk to a guy from Trouts Unlimited too. It was
Yeah.
like the same day, and I was like, oh yeah, wait, there's this thing going on, but I
Yeah.
just remembered. You were like, I want to come out, so. He's like, anything you need. I'm like,
Yeah. Some better cost estimates.
yeah, okay, perfect. We can let him know.
I will. So that's just an idea of what we have going on. And then if you look at page 14 of the packet, it'll show those scenarios. Again, scenario 1 being 3 full-time employees, and not that whole 246 is not going to Public Works, because a portion of that goes to water. And not only that, but a portion, some of it also goes to other special revenue funds. Not a lot. Like I said, the majority of their time does end up in Public Works. But some does, end up going to dock or BHO or water and sewer. Some of those projects we mentioned, the dam, the fire hydrant, those things would all be appropriated, allocated to water or their appropriate class. So not everything goes to Public Works, but the majority of it does. And then that portion to water. This also doesn't include harbor maintenance, which for the last couple of years, they've had their own maintenance employee. And we're still recommending that coming into this next fiscal year. However, with a more project-based focus, it's always been project-based focus, but less day-to-day improvements and more and just working on projects. It's just be a little bit more streamlined, less time spent on overall improvements and more focused time. Scenario 2, which is our current scenario, is that 1.5 Public Works, a half water, half Public Works again, and then the 0.25 groundskeeper. And you'll see that the salary range is actually very similar. That difference is the benefits. Scenario 3 is one that the cities run off of for the majority of the time, for a very long time until recently. And that is having just the 2 full-time employees, and that and then a part-time either Public Works, and that could be groundskeeper or snow help, whatever that need is there throughout the year. And then scenario 4, which we've also run on, and is doable. It's just that is we're taking care of basic needs. We're doing day to day, and there's nothing extra happening. And that's just 2 employees. So, and just to note for full-time employees, they are at 37.5 hours with benefits. Like I said, water is not included in so water is included in this total. Because I didn't want to pull out individual salaries and show them online. So water is in this total. But so this whole total wouldn't go into Public Works is what I'm trying to say. But you can see that total on.
So
page
Heidi, question
30.
then, given what you know, with past history of being able to staff those positions, be that it's current scenario 2 and 2, or maybe a little more robust option of 3 full-time employees. I don't know. I'm kind of torn in between there. Have you guys talked internally what best fits the city's needs? I mean, is it having 2 full-time with 2 part-time to where you can balance that? And then that gives you 4 people. And if you needed, obviously, if there was special circumstances, special project, big heavy snow, you would have more bodies. 3 full-time. I mean, obviously hours are hours. Um, so I don't know what's your thoughts on that when you guys, if you've wrestled with that one internally.
Yes, thank you. So we did have this conversation, and I heard from the Public Works Department that there was a preference for three. A lot of it had to do with the potential of who could be hired and the fear that it might be hard to hire a part-time employee. And we have had some success with it, but that's not always the case, especially for this job and what we're asking people to do. And also that the thought being that while we have a primary lead water treatment operator, and Amanda does fill in, and actually Layla fills in a little bit as well, it'd be nice to have a third person in the department who could also operate in water, and we could switch it between, 2 or 2.5 employees doing water, instead of relying really heavily on 1 or 1.5 employees to do it. So that was a consideration, and really just having that solid team was what was suggested. However, the scenario 2 is a great scenario as well. There's just the worry that when you're getting somebody in part-time like that, yeah, depending on experience level and availability, what does that look like?
If I can jump in, because I love this topic. Heidi knows I've talked to her a lot about it. I think it's hard to plan because I think it's very applicant based.
Mhm.
And I know in the past I've had some talks with Heidi on keeping that very open, because so that people that are looking at it aren't feeling like we're trying to fill a mold, because you might have somebody who's going to come with a bunch of qualifications and be able to give us a part-time position and will be amazing at that and committed in that, but wouldn't look at it if it was full-time. We might have somebody that can fill a full-time, and they're like, we've had, green coming in and we're having to train. In an ideal world, what I hope that opens to is, I know I would love to see a lead that would oversee both departments, that is Heidi's left hand, right hand, whatever it is, that can be that leader. Coming from a management background, it just was crazy to me when I saw that we didn't have a lead anymore, because I said, people can say they don't want that or they function better without a leader, but a department, it won't work as efficient. You need somebody who is going to be able to look and delegate and be that planning, and they're going to be part of it too. But so as Heidi here's the goals, here what needs to happen on that day to day, they're in there making sure all that happens. So you're not pulled away from that, and they're in it hands in. Obviously the part-time person it's leaving has experience and knowledge of here that is great that we're losing, but that's where it's kind of like keeping it open, that if that person were there, or looking at it as somebody being hired in, that between them and who we have here, I'd love to see either hiring somebody in if we find them who can be that person, or working to build that person internally, so that we can have that strong point. I think it will help everybody in all departments, but help that department feel a lot stronger. And that's something that for me, going through the budget is worth the money. Like if it comes through and there's somebody who's got their CDL, all experience in water or around with public works, construction, different things, having that conversation of, okay, we might need to adjust. We have this amazing candidate. Obviously, we don't know if they come or not, but uh, that's what I would like to see, is like a goal.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, because that really, if we budget for the scenario 1, that does give that flexibility, and that it was part of the discussion with the department, is, well, what if we have another green person come on, and what does that look like? And talking about, that means more city manager involvement and time, and we already meet daily pretty much, but making sure we have those really set meeting times to talk about what the expectations are and the projects for the day, and just more involvement on that part until we have somebody who is comfortable in stepping up into that. We have somebody who is willing now, but just it's, it's a learning curve. And so
Yeah.
mentoring and training up into that, which we could get to, or maybe we have the amazing candidate who comes in and has that
Yeah.
experience and is able to do that.
And I
I'm
think,
not sure, but that does
having-
give the flexibility.
yeah, and I think even though that number, being the higher number, but potentially looking like if that needs to have a range that could grow to fit the right person, because I think that is a large part of why we haven't been able to grab that candidate, because they can find jobs other places where it's cheaper to live and or travel to work and make that money, and it's hard to find that person that's like, I want, they want to live here, but that money speaks. And I think when you think of the city, this is the heart of the services we provide, and if there's anywhere for that money to be spent, I would support adjusting that to get somebody who's going to be worth that if that candidate came by.
I just want to speak to the scenario one for the 3-time employee. I agree with Ashley. I feel like you're responsible for enough, eventually if, there was that candidate that, could qualify as a lead, I think that would be absolutely vital. I also think that, with the growth that we're seeing with all the projects that we have, can we make it do, with oh yeah, I'm sure we can, but these people are, you're gonna wear them out and they can't be everywhere. So I would like to see scenario one with 3 full-time employees and maybe get some more of these projects done.
I have a question. Do we have to pay dump fees at the garbage dump? Does the city have to pay dump fees out there?
We do not for our refuse service, but for commercial projects, we do, yes.
So if we had to clean up the city storage yard out there and haul some of that stuff up, we'd have to pay for that then, or is that?
Yeah, I believe the last we were quoted at was $200 a dump load.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Have you taken that into consideration?
We we have talked about it, yes. Right now we are doing, we're burning what we can, and have gotten away with not needing to do that. We have talked about costs for cleaning up jackloth. So that's not in this conversation tonight because it's more harbor focused. But that will be in the conversation for harbor, is what those costs look like to clean up that area.
I have a comment.
Yes.
Circling back to budget scenario, circling back to budget scenario one, I'm in favor and support what Ashley and Amon said. So just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sounds like we got fairly good support, Heidi, to move forward in that direction.
So that really concluded the meat of the general fund, unless you guys have other questions or things you want to talk about. I know we've been here just a little over an hour. I can pull up the budget and we can talk about special revenue funds if you want, or if you guys want to save it and talk about it Monday before the Monday meeting. Leave it up to you guys on how you want to move forward from here. Is this a good stopping point, or you want to keep going?
What are the wishes of the council?
I have 2 other questions. First off, on the web page on permits and that, and I think I brought this up to you, has that been corrected? So that when people come in to buy the permit, they get charged what they see on the web.
for the building permit?
Yes.
I believe so, but I'll double check.
Okay, because I know that's just the second time that float that I brought down from Halibut Cove,
Mhm.
I see it dry docked up here. What's the plans for that?
That's a great question. We can talk to our Seldovia Arts Council and see what their plan is.
I can answer that. You want me here?
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
we do have Wally in attendance, that he says he can answer that question if you would like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we'll get him a mic.
Well, that's my. But to expedite things. The current plan right now with that is that the Arts Council kind of looked at it as too much of a liability to put back into the water for various reasons. And soon as things thaw out, we're planning on getting that moved over to where the what will we call that structure? The clamshell was, and basically unbolt the clamshell from where it's at and just get that out of the way. And then place that there as more of a stage that we would level out and everything. And reattach the clamshell back onto the new stage. So it fulfills a couple purposes. One, it's not a liability that's going to sink in the harbor. And it provides a nice stage because the wood and everything on there is in good shape and it's good solid structure for that. So that's kind of the current thinking.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wally.
Thank you, Wally.
Any other questions on any other budget items that we've gone over? Heidi, I have a quick one on the police, Seldovia Police Department expenses.
Sure, Mr. Mayor.
Let's see here. Equipment. The 4,500, so the vehicle expenses on the Ford truck. We've got 4,500 there. What does that encompass? Is that repairs or is that gas? What is that exactly?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That is primarily fuel. However, in FY 26, APIA did budget for those fuel expenses. So we are sending them, or we are invoicing them as a pass-through. We don't know what their budget's going to look like for FY 27. The truck does need a few more repairs. We're looking at that this year and hoping to get that done this year within, like I said, within that budget, since that 4,500 is passing through. But potentially we could look at needing more for FY 27, depending.
Okay. And then I guess one comment I had, I'm trying to find out on the overall, when we start talking about public works and fuel, yeah, God only knows where this is going to end up here for fuel costs here by the mid-year, end of year, whatever. Especially it looks like diesel is way outpacing the increases in gasoline. So we're going to want to make sure we've accounted for we're going to have to be pretty fairly conservative on our what we're thinking on cost on that.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question because that actually is a conversation Chris and I kind of had internally, but thinking from the city's end too. Has the city ever approached the Fuel and Lube to find out what it would take to do like a pre-purchasing that would allow them to get a better rate? Because I know with how they purchase their fuel, part of why our rate is higher also is, the amount that they're going to purchase and the cost of purchasing on credit and such. And so if there would be any break or any advantage if there were entities like the city or other entities as well who know they're going to use a large amount of fuel to pay like a down payment up front when we know that the fuel is going to be delivered, to see if that can help us get a lower rate. We were just trying to brainstorm anything that could help help everybody in that, because that would actually help the community as well. If there's any way of having cash up front helps them get a lower rate, because like for us, if we know we're going to we budget ahead and we're going to have that, and if it's there, we're able to use it, kind of prepay. And I know like on our business, we could do that. And there might be others as well. That might be something that the city and in the community, maybe we can do to help us lower our fuel costs.
Excellent suggestion. No, we have not had that conversation, so it could be worth having. Certainly.
Okay.
And I would point out, thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Mayor. I did include as keeping the budgeted rate of 15,000 in this year's budget, even though right now we're trending in FY 26 to date for fuel under, for instance, Public Works, heating fuel. We're only at 48% of the budget. And that was as of March. So, well, March isn't complete. So as of February, looking at 48%, but I did not want to decrease that number with the unknown, the uncertainty of what fuel is going to do here in the future.
Yeah, I wouldn't let a penny of that go until the bitter end. So
Exactly.
that one's likely gonna bite you. And to Ashley's point there, yeah, that's fairly common. Like even in our industry, construction industry, when we know we're gonna have need fuel remote, we will generally hedge and purchase our fuel months. It might be 6 months, 8 months ahead of time, depending on where when we start looking at prices. If they are reasonable and we want to lock it in, that's real typical with Vitus, Crowley, all of those. You can call them and typically just go ahead and lock it down. You'd have to talk to the fuel company here to see how we could handle that with them, but it does require 100% payment. You typically sign a contract and then you have to pay within X amount of days, like just within like 2 days to get that. But you can lock your rate and then you can take delivery 6 months later or whatever the case is down the road.
I will bring that up. Anything else regarding general fund?
Nothing regarding the general fund.
Do you guys want to do a sneak peek at the special revenue fund, or do you want to save it for Monday? I know this is a lot, so I can understand wanting to digest it or wanting to dive in.
I have one other question. But on the RV park,
Mhm.
revenues collected was $400 and some dollars or something, I believe.
Let me look back at that.
420,
Yeah, I think it was under 500 or right around.
$435.
Yeah, the rest will come this spring. That's our big rental time, is in the spring.
Okay, so that's it. Does that 435 reflect a full year revenue?
It does. That's a tricky one that I actually need to dig into. It does from the city office. I was just talking with Layla, and I think what's happening is the rest of it is getting lumped into Harbor when she's doing it out of her Harbor office. So that's a conversation I'm having with Layla and Jan, is to make sure that we pull those out from the Harbor, because she's selling $700 to $800 worth of camping a year that's not being reflected back into the Public Works or into the general fund. So
Like,
it needs to come back. And I thank you for pointing that out, because that is something that we noticed when we were going through this budget process. Yeah. That's you'll see when you see Harbor, there's a credit card line, and that's where a lot of her stall rentals and things end up. And I'm pretty sure the campings ending up in there too. So we're gonna have to break it out.
What time is our work session scheduled for next week?
I was thinking 4:30. It'll probably be very similar to this, except we won't have the overview in the beginning. And we'll just dive right in. You have 6 special revenue accounts. So that would be your water, sewer, harbor, dock, boat haul out, senior meals. 7, sorry, because now we have the volunteer fire and EMS. So
Yeah, why don't we just, if you guys are fine, let's just go ahead and wait till next week, and then we'll keep it all kind of lumped together on how we're tracking here, keep it all fresh.
okay, thank you guys so much. That was hopefully very beneficial.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi.
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. Appreciate that. Did we have any comments from anyone from the public that wished to weigh in on what we talked about here tonight?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
Nothing. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if we had anybody online or anything too. All right, sounds good. With that, then it's about 7:22 now. We'll go ahead and conclude the work session. And yeah, we'll just go ahead and stand in adjournment, and then we'll see everybody on next week on Monday at 4:30 for the next work session, and then followed by a regular council meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.